Hi, it's Andrew Wheeler. Welcome back to my video channel. Today, I just want to do a short video on the study models and creating a set of study models within Blender4Dental. This is all within the model module, so it's easy accessible and a relatively straightforward part of the model module. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to bring into the scene a set of models that I've prepared earlier just to speed things up a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll go up into the file, use the open button. I saved it on the desktop. There you go, study models, and we'll open that up. As you can see from here, I've aligned the scans, I've done the arch cut, and we've got them looking a very presentable and a nice set of models. Obviously, the more work and time you put into preparing your models, the nicer the result at the end of the design process. Now, before we go any further, there's just something to mention. There is a button on the keyboard called the tilde key. Tilde key, I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right, but it's just below the escape button on your keyboard. Now, what that does is it brings up a nice menu where we can align the models in the view accurately. That's quite an important feature when it comes to the study model um, feature, because we can, when we're adjusting bases, it extrudes along certain lines, and we need the models in the correct position um, to be able to do that accurately. And this is one way we do it. It's a very easy way of spinning the models around, viewing them from different areas and different views uh, without having to do it by eye. That's something it's worth noting. Anyway, having said that, we'll crack on and get on with the making the models, study models. Here we are. It's down here. This is the menu that we're going to be using within the model module. First thing we need to do, as always, is name the models. So we highlight the upper, and there we can see an orange line around that, so we know that that's selected. We'll click the Name Upper button. Then the naming field will change. We've got the lower here. We'll name the lower. So now we are all set to go to. So we then move down to the Import Study Model tab, and there you can see it's imported the bases into the scene. There you can see the upper, which has got the pointed front to it, and the lower, which is the rounded. Now, the models that we have done need to sit within these bases. As you can see there, it's placed it in quite nicely. This is obviously, these models are the Blender4Dental models. They're nice models, and they're a good set to start practicing and working with. A lot of the model that we get in the lab don't tend to be easier to work with, so we can adjust this frame by using the same keyboard controls and mouse controls that we have done before. So if we click on S, we can scale, make bigger and smaller the bases depending on the type of model and the size of models that we're using. Now, having said that, as a standard, when they bring the base in to the scene, it conforms to the United States orthodontic dimensions of study models. And if you change that, you then lose those dimensions. So it really depends on how and the type of work you're doing, and where you're sending these models after you're printing them. So there we have it. It's within here. We make sure that there is sufficient space between the model and the base, just so we can create a nice junction between the two further down the line. We can, as I said before, we can move the base and get it in an optimal position by using the arrows. And as before, S to scale if we want to change. It's tempting to try and make everything small, but yeah, don't, because it will mess up the end result. And G to grab, so we can then move it around. Once we've got the models within the base and we're happy with it, we then just untick the show X-ray and we go back into a solid view format. We can spin the models around, and there we can see the outlines of the study model bases. And from here, it will sort of produce the base that we're going to see in a minute. Before we get there, there's a few adjustments we can do with where the base meets the model. This arrow, as you can see here, now this is where I'm going to use the tilde key. So I'm going to press that. I'm going to line it up from the front. So we've got a front view. Now, obviously both these bases are highlighted. We've got the move arrows here, so we can obviously move the bases up and down. Now, these bases are preformed, so they're designed to fit most standard models, but you can also adjust them and you can move them around. We'll do the first one, we'll do the upper on the first, so we'll highlight the base on the upper. Now that's highlighted, it will move independently of the lower. We will go to the side and use the R key to rotate slightly and reposition that base. Have to be a little bit careful that we don't start encroaching with the base onto the back teeth there. If we do, it's not a problem. I'll show you how we get around there. There you can see, good example. It's starting to encroach onto that prep, so we'll move that down a bit. Once we're happy with where that base is, we'll then work on the lower. So we'll move that around, tilde key, and then we will just rotate that base into a bit of a more favorable position, making sure that it's encroaching a little bit on the occlusal surface of that 7, but we can reduce that, we can remove that in the next stage. Once we're happy with how we've got, what we're going to do then is just try and tidy up a little bit the bases and the model. And we do this, we'll do the lower first since it's highlighted. We'll move over here to the edit button. We'll click on the edit button, and there you can see that we are now in a edit mode for the base. There you can see we've changed into the edit mode. Now we do this so we can then move this and put it in a better position so we get a much nicer finish between the model base and the model. Now we'll start here. The first thing we do is select a vertex near to the model. We press G to grab it, and then a little round circle will appear. And that you can then move. Now, having one vertex highlighted and moving doesn't really make a lot of difference. If you use the mouse wheel, you can make that circle bigger or smaller, and hence move more vertices in one go, which gives you a much nicer finish. So reposition, left click to move away. As I said earlier, you can see that the base here is encroaching on the tooth there. So we'll highlight one of those vertices, press G. Now we've still got that nicely positioned circle. Again, G, we're going to lift and move. Now, as you can see, this can be done all the way around, so you get a really nice finish between your base and your model. Now, my field is not orthodontics, it's crown and bridge. So when I do these study models, this is purely for just for clinicians to review cases, and it's not as critical as an orthodontic case, which obviously has to conform to certain standards and dimensions. Now, you can work your way around and you can move all these vertices to create yourself a really fabulous looking model. And obviously the longer that you want to spend with the time on it, the better the model you're going to get. So I'm going to whiz round here and just do this just for sort of demo purposes. I won't go around and do the upper because then it will give you an idea of what you're going to get if you just bring the bases in and base it from there. So, oh no, sorry, we don't do that. I'll just highlight that, grab that. And this is what I meant about having enough space between the model and the edge. If this is very small, you start to move the nicely formed edge of the base if there's not enough vertices there. Anyway, we'll whip round this bit, bring those up. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Right, you get the idea. You can do the same to the upper. So once you've got the lower done, we'll just click edit, and that will bring us out of that. If you wanted to go ahead and do the upper, you highlight the upper base and click edit, which will then do the same. You can then go through the same procedure to do the upper. Right, when we're at this point, we will make sure the models are facing us, and we will add the bases. Click on the upper base, and it will create the upper base. Click on the lower base, and there we have the lower. And there basically are your study models. These are quite big models, so you're printing them, use a lot of resin. So we're going to hollow them, save a bit of resin. So we go through the same procedure that we do when we're hollowing normal models. Highlight your model you want to hollow, sorry. Click the Make Hollow, and that will put a wireframe box around the model. And then we'll do honey vented because I always do honey vented. You can do either and or other ones. We'll then go into the honey vented view, and we will move the arrow up. As you can see, if we keep moving too far, just like before, it covers in. So we reduce it a little bit and have a look at the base. Now, I think I've mentioned this before, but these vents in the past have caused me problems with printing, so I don't ever leave them. I always cover them up so we get a flat bed, so I can put this on flat on the print bed. Once we've got it to the stage, the level we want, we can click apply. We will then do the same to the lower. The wireframe box appears around the model, so we know that we're in the hollowing tool. And then we'll choose the honey vented again. And there we have the arrow, so we'll pull that back down, making sure that once it's, just put it back a bit, or have a look and inspect it. There you can see within that structure we've got the vents there, so we're okay with that. We will then apply that. Now, for all intents and purposes, we're pretty much finished with the study models from here. We can name them and then export them to be printed. There's a few little extra things you can play around with here if you wanted to improve the final product. As you can see, where I was pulling this mesh up, it's created an uneven surface around here. This is because there was not enough mesh in between these two parts to sort of deform the base by moving the mesh. Something you've got to bear in mind. Now, the junction between the two is obviously two very different mesh structures. What we can do is, if you wanted to really make it a lot smoother, we can go back into the sculpt option. Say we want to recreate that mesh. I'm going to reduce the radius of this, and then I'm going to run over the junction here. Now, I can then start moving this all around here and smoothing everything over. And this is the great thing about Blender. It's, you've got all these tools to use, and you can use them at whichever point in the design process you want. They all do the same thing. And there you can see we're just going around, smoothing over, and you get to a point where, if I just exit out of there and have a look at that, it all looks part. It all looks as though it's one homogeneous unit as opposed to something that's been dropped inside something else. It's not essential, but it's another little feature of Blender that we can play around with. So there we have it. We can adjust the bases relatively easily if we find that these bases are too big, and after we've done the hollowing tool, it's very easy to just adjust them. So what we'll do is we'll make sure the models are facing front onto us. We highlight the model that we want to adjust. We click into edit mode, and there you can see the different meshes. We'll then select I'll go back down here to the X-ray, so it will go right the way through the model. We press B on the keyboard and we select these areas to be either moved or increased or decreased. So there we can pull and make the base as big or as small as we want to. Let's reduce that a bit. There's a proportional editing tool, this little circle up here, which if you're playing around with this, you really need to deselect when you're moving and playing around with this part of it. It works on both. It just depends on how much you want to extend or reduce the base that you're using. So we'll go back into object mode, click off the X-ray, and there you have a lot smaller base for the model. So there we have it. The study model feature within Blender4Dental, as you can see, relatively straightforward, speedy way of creating some study models ready to be printed. I hope you enjoyed it, found it useful. Thank you very much for watching, and please subscribe to the channel. I'll be doing lots of these other short little videos going through the ins and outs of Blender4Dental.